Alright, thank you for joining me in this video. This video is out for all the composers and arrangers who are looking into orchestrating and arranging for the Indian Bamboo Flutes. I've also attached the slides or the document for this particular presentation. When you need it, you can just email me. I will just forward you this document. So on that note, let's start by looking at some background information on the Indian Bamboo Flutes. You just have to have a general understanding of the Bamboo Flutes in order to compose for this. So the context. So as you look at the slide, there are two major counterparts for the Indian classical music. There is the Carnatic music system and the Hindustani classical music system. So the flutes were originally folk instruments. They were like feeble flutes, and they became transfers as the individual ancestors of the music system brought the flute into the mainstream or the prevalent music system at the time, which was Carnatic and Hindustani classical music. So in the Carnatic side, we had Mali, who brought the flute, the 8-hole flute, and then there is Panalal Ghosh in the Hindustani counterpart, who brought the Bansuri into the classical music system. So we need to know the differences. The similarities is very clear. They're made up of bamboo. They're usually attached to similar folklores of Krishna and whatnot. So if you're looking at difference of the Venu between Venu and Bansuri, is that Venu is actually a very important instrument in the Carnatic music fraternity, because it became a solo instrument and also became an accompanying instrument. It's not as close as the violin to where it resonates well with the voice. So it's a 8-hole flute. The Venu is a 8-hole flute to accommodate the music system, and whereas the Bansuri is a 6-hole flute to accommodate the slow movement in the Hindustani classical music system. A bit about the tonal quality, which is very much linked to the type of bamboo as well. So the Venu is made of Trun Walker bamboo quality, and as well as the bamboos from the Mangalore forest. Where the Bansuri, where some of the Bansuris that I have is from the Assam region, where they are called Assam bamboo, or also known as the weaver's bamboo. So these are the differences, the physical differences of the Indian bamboo flute. So let's go into the composing aspect of it. We need to know the tonal quality, the differences between these flutes. So for the Venu, it's actually rich and bright, of course, to accommodate the ornamentals in the Carnatic music system. And also when the flute became an accompaniment instrument for the fraternity, for the dance fraternity, Bharatanatyam, traditional fraternity. It also, to accompany female singers, we usually have to use G, O, A, or when we are accompanying a male vocalist, we use C or D. So these are the ranges that we use in a classical context. Whereas for Bansuri is more mellow and round, because the role of the flute also determined the kind of tonal quality that's required of the Bansuri. So of course, to accommodate melodic movement and whatnot. So we must bear in mind that these flutes were used to replicate the music system or the vocals, and we are usually in a jazz intonation frame, where you're using ears to understand how this music shapes, and we usually set it to 440 Hz or 442 Hz, predominantly 440 Hz for performance. And like some of my flutes are set in 450 Hz because of the nature of my methodology. I usually turn in and play, which will make the flute fall into 440 Hz. So getting used to the turning, it also takes practice. So there's an understanding that usually it's set at 440 Hz. So that's the differences between this both flute. Not much of a difference, but the difference is more in the tonal quality aspect, not in tuning. Let's look into scales and modes. This is a very interesting aspect of composing and arranging music as well. So for scales and modes, I want to make this very brief, because we can go on and talking about what are the ragas and how they're presented and why they're presented, the raga ragini classification, Melakarta classification system. I don't want to go into that. But just to have an understanding that both the Venu and Bansuri can operate chromatically. This is very important, so that we also can play to address chord changes in jazz music or movement of tonal centers. And there's an approach of the flautists that they usually play more than one tonal centers using these techniques, different fingering configurations, or using different flutes. So just bear in mind that we can operate chromatically, unlike some of the Asian music systems, which is pentatonically oriented. So I've shown that in slide on this slide on page 7. So there's the differences between the Carnatic and the Hindustani. You can see it off the slide. So the classification for Carnatic involves 72 combinations or 72 Melakarta. And understand this is 72 can go into further classification of the 7 modes of their individual 7 modes. So I've indicated the common crossovers. These are the common ragas used in this Western Hemisphere as well. So if you're looking into the 7 major modes, there's the Carnatic 7 major modes, Hindustani 7 major modes. And if you're talking about minor modes, the melodic minor, Dorian flat 2, lead in augmented, lead in dominant and whatnot, those has this combinations as well. We have that raga combination. And of course the melodic minor and harmonic minor. There is the bebop scales, jazz scales and blues scales and whatnot. Those are jazz derivations. And of course there are ragas attached to that as well. That's out of scope for this. So you can read off the differences in the Hindustani and Carnatic off the slide. So that with that, let's talk about how the scales and modes can operate chromatically with regards to the Venu and Bansuri. So understand by fixing tonal center, and we are just moving one semitone high. We're not going to talk about enharmonics in the Carnatic system yet because it's very complex. Not very complex. It's out of scope for this presentation. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, and whatnot. As you move chromatically, we're also shifting sa, re, re, ga 1, ga 2, ga 3, ma 2, pa, da 1, da 2. The possible combinations are located in page 8. Okay, right. So we have talked about the tonal quality, how to compose with this tonal ranges, where the Venu holds the high regions and the Bansuri usually low and mellow regions. Now let's talk about the crossover, the range and octaves of the Indian Bamboo Flute. Just bear in mind that the Western flute is 3 octaves, whereas for the Indian Bamboo Flute we have 2 octaves with 2 extended notations or notes. So we are excluding the overtone, the use of overblowing to hit some of the overtone harmonies. We are excluding that for this presentation. So if you look at it, I've talked about the 2 different ranges. So for the Venu, we start with the low ga. So we go through low ga to middle ga and to the high pa. That is the range which, in the context where we are talking about E in the E major scale, we're talking about G sharp, the lowest G sharp, all the way to the highest pa, or is called B. I've indicated this in the upcoming slide where we look at the bass clef and the treble clef and show you how our scales and range can be optimized. Whereas for the Bansuri, it starts with the A sharp because with the flat 4 the Matu, the very important the diminished element of the Matu, all the way up to the high pa and B. So we need to know these 2 differences. This is the range capability of the Venu and Bansuri individually. If you're composing just for the Venu or composing just for the Bansuri, this is the context. So how do we optimize the range for the Venu and Bansuri? Theoretically, assuming that the E is the tonal center, you can look at the chart. So I put the range of Bansuri there and the range of Venu. So starts from the bass clef, of course the A sharp of the bass clef, and all the way till to the treble, a high B on the treble clef. That's the range when you use both the Bansuri and Venu, the range in a composition. However, just bear in mind that the compositions can be notated just in treble clef and just indicate whether you need the tonality of the Bansuri or the Venu. As simple as that. You no need to go and write in bass clef and treble. You can do that. Ultimately, I'll be transposing them up into Carnatic notation. So whichever that's comfortable with you. So I'm okay with both the bass and treble clef being used. And if you want both the Bansuri and Venu, however, if you are individually composing for bass, Bansuri or a Venu, indicate just into a treble clef. So incorporating music system. So we have just talked about the basic of how you bring in the music, bring in Bansuri. How about the music? So there's a bit of complexity in this. So you need to know the differences between how Carnatic and Hindustani music operates. That's also beyond the scope of this. So just understand that Carnatic music uses a lot of phrasing and language, like there's a lot of jazz intonation involved where I'm not hitting the fourth in the equal temperament scale, but maybe a bit lower. So with all that in mind, where Hindustani music is more about melodic movement, how we move from one note to the other, or you phrase one note to the other. So there are 2 different distinct languages. One is more, Hindustani is more oriented towards the notes. Carnatic is oriented towards more phrasing. So with that, how you can notate this is where section wherever you need to be played has written. You need not need any information, and just let me read as it is. Where sections where you need a flavor of the mode or the raga, you can just write the name of the raga. Example, Shankarabharanam Ionium, or you need Asaviri in a Hindustani mode. You just have to write them down, and I will add shades of the raga in on top of the written composition, more like an interpretation. So the gamakas can also be notated, which is extremely out of this scope, especially for Hindustani. You can write out what kind of gamaka you need, and that's how most of the composers currently do it. So when they also notate some of the gamaka, they usually tend to be out of towards Hindustani. You can, very difficult to notate Carnatic music because of the feel and the language. So for me, it's the right balance between that. So when you write and you ask me to interpret, I will interpret between those balance. And you must bear in mind that I'm actually trying to attain a fine balance between jazz intonation and the incool temperament. When you ask me to read as it is, I'm using my ears to make sure that it's in exact pitch with the harmony. When I can sense the harmony, ambience, the surroundings as well. Or when you ask me to brew an alap, I will go into jazz intonation to the extent where it still falls nicely within that chord harmony. So I won't go into extreme jazz intonation where my notes will go into any form of pitching, but more of a relative pitching. So basically, you can notate the gamakas, where the Carnatic is Dasavida gamakas, Hindustani has Kayaki gamakas. So there's the 10 and the 6 kind of gamakas. That's really beyond the scope of this presentation, because that will take you into how raga can be developed and how these gamakas are used in this raga, and which very contextual in nature according to composition, how this composition teaches you this raga. So I don't want to go into that specific. This basic might give you an introduction of how you actually can get a good balance of these ragas from a flautist, Venu and Bansuri, of course. Thank you so much. Hope this helps you.